Open Channel D. Welcome to Cocktails in Mr. Waverly's office. I'm Logan.
I'm Eartha.
And I'm Hannah.
So today we're going to be talking about 3 episodes. We're going to be talking about the Finny Foot affair, the Neptune affair, and the Dove affair. These episodes are all pretty much, they're all pretty Napoleon-centric, so unfortunately there's not going to be much Ilya and Napoleon action, so... I know it sounds really bad, but I mean,
choice of words.
I wasn't trying to sound sexual there. I was just trying to say, you won't experience the sort of chemistry there that you usually expect from the Man from U.N.C.L.E. But you do get another form of chemistry in the Dove affair, but we'll explain that later.
Well, let's start on the most innocent end of the spectrum with the Finny Foot affair. So the Finny Foot affair is an episode that features as sort of its main innocent, actually, a small child, played by a very young Kurt Russell. So in the Finny Foot affair, there is an evil gas that turns people old. It's a virus that does something to your DNA and makes you age rapidly and then die. And there's a General Yokura, who is trying to obtain this gas and use it to take over the world, and Napoleon needs to prevent him from doing this. In the process of trying to go to Switzerland and find out how to prevent this gas from being used, he bumps into this child at an airport. And the child basically...
I'm sorry, it was Sweden, actually.
No, Sweden, not Switzerland.
No, weren't they going to Norway?
Norway, yes.
It was a northern country. Norway is correct. To be fair, and I'm interrupting my summary here for a moment, to be fair, this is one of those episodes where they go to a European country and, absolutely nothing about this country in any way signals anything about the country that they're in, so they just go to, a town square, and it's a totally neutral town square that could be anywhere in the world, because it's the MGM backlot. So, yeah, Norway, but frankly, doesn't really matter that it's Norway. So anyway, they go there, or rather Napoleon, on his way there, he picks up this child unintentionally. The kid starts following him because he thinks that Napoleon is going to be a good match for his widowed mother. And the child convinces the airport security and flight attendants, basically, that his tickets got screwed up somehow, and he actually should be going to Norway with Napoleon. So he gets on the plane with him, and so Napoleon has to unravel this mystery while also preventing this child who has decided basically Napoleon's his new dad from dying.
Oh.
And it's an episode that I think could really easily have fallen really flat. Oftentimes if you involve a random child in the mix, particularly for the vast majority of an episode, you have the potential to have a lot of really bad acting and a lot of, really bad writing where people don't really know what children are like. But I actually really like this character. I think that he's a really, cute kid, and I think that he's a cute kid in a pretty realistic way, and I think his interactions with Napoleon are really sweet.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah. I always, get really tense up when I get really tense when I hear there's going to be a child actor, because I'm just like, oh god, it's just going to suck. It's just going to be really hard to watch. Again, it could either suck because the child doesn't have enough experience, or because the writers have no clue how children actually act. But here, none of those problems happen, because even at a young age, Kurt Russell was a good actor, and the writing was good too, so those problems didn't happen. So if you haven't seen it, don't worry, that those sort of issues won't be apparent. So
yeah.
So is it just me, or they were on an island off Scotland at the beginning, but on the trees in the background, like the trees, like they did not look Scottish. Like I kind of thought they might be palm trees, but I wasn't entirely sure because they were so far in the background. Like, do you know what the, like, I was just like, these trees just don't look Scottish to me, though.
At best, it was like a Mediterranean environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the trees right now, and I mean they have leaves on their tops, and it doesn't look very European, yes.
I mean, again, Southern California stands in for every single place in the world in Man from U.N.C.L.E, so not shocking that Scotland is not all that Scottish.
Yeah.
Just like how, it seems like there's like default cities where everything is filmed for various reasons, so that stands in for like a certain area, but then Southern California stands in for the world.
You know, I feel like philosophically that really says something about Hollywood.
Yeah. That was unintentional deepness.
But also like money. You gotta save money.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it would have been way too
But I'm also
expensive
saying,
to
like,
go other
there's-
places.
For example, there's also like local areas that like kind of like have a similar thing. Like this, like Vancouver, BC usually stands in for Seattle for some reason.
Cheaper.
I mean, Vancouver stands for like almost every American city as far as I know.
Yeah.
No, they use Toronto sometimes for like Chicago and Boston.
Yeah, Toronto. I mean,
if it's an
I've
East
heard
Coast
about
city,
it.
they use Toronto. If it's a West Coast city, they use Vancouver.
Yeah. Speaking of the beginning of the episode, it was really funny seeing them in these spacesuits.
Oh yeah, I don't understand that. I don't know why they got out of the helicopter wearing that.
No,
okay, I
understand.
I
understand why they were wearing this, because they knew that there was some kind of a virus or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're hazmat suits. They're just hazmat suits that look like space suits.
Okay, I didn't realize they were hazmat suits, because I don't know what 60s hazmat suits look like. Is that what the 60s hazmat suits normally look like, or is that just
it's
man from
not.
Uncle Warren?
Just man from Uncle World.
Okay, it's just man from Uncle Land. Okay, because I was going to say, I did not recognize those as hazmat suits.
So, I had a good giggle at this episode, watching it this second time through, because of the opening with them in the spacesuits that are secretly hazmat suits, because my husband and I recently started rewatching Star Trek Original Series, and there's an episode in the first season of Original Series called Miri, and it starts very
That was my first Star Trek episode. I was 9 years old.
And the crew of the Enterprise goes down to the surface of this planet where, like, they think most of the population has been killed off, and they find all these, like, elderly corpses, and then they see, like, one old guy, like, dying on the ground. But unlike Napoleon and Ilya, who are in hazmat suits, Kirk and Spock and McCoy are imbeciles, and they touch all the corpses. And so they all get the old people disease. And they have to spend the rest of the episode figuring out how to not have the old people disease. So anyway, rewatching this episode, I was like, oh, Napoleon and Ilya are smarter than the Star Trek crew.
That's pretty amazing.
Yup.
I mean, yeah, Star Trek came out 2 years after the Man from U.N.C.L.E, so I don't know, maybe they...
Actually, I think it's 2 years.
Yeah, I said 2 years, I think. And...
Oh yeah, they 100% stole this plot. Like, no
Yeah.
So also, I think there's the whole trope of Ilya being obsessed with food, and it strikes again in this episode. And he's actually, after Ilya is literally shot, he says, "But please hurry back to London. I don't want to miss lunch."
I also just really appreciate appreciate that Ilya is, like, he's very mildly shot. Like, he's not, he's not
Like-
shot
like-
at any...
He's not like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, literally putting like a whole sandwich into his mouth at once.
Yes, and afterwards,
Also-
Ilya is sent to recuperate because he got shot and he has to heal up a bit. That's why he's not in the rest of the episode, presumably.
Yeah, he has to recuperate. That's what they say in the episode.
There's a very cute little moment, and it's the only cute little Ilya Napoleon moment, where basically Waverly leaves and Ilya and Napoleon are left behind, and they kind of, flash each other those looks they give each other. And,
Flash each other.
And they flash each other. Somehow that got past the censors in 1965. I just don't understand. They make, loving eye contact, and there's a moment where, Ilya says something about having to recuperate, and Napoleon looks at him and says, "That's an order," repeating what Waverly said, and they both just smile, and it looks like there's going to be a continuation of the conversation, and then Waverly yells at them both.
Oh.
Season 1 Waverly is so much meaner than later Waverly,
Yeah.
because not only is he yelling at them there, but there's also a scene earlier when they first get back from Scotland, that is Southern California, and he says something like, he complains about the virus being there, and he complains about them, getting shot at, and he complains about everything that happens as if it is all Napoleon's fault. And it's like, Napoleon didn't put the virus there. Napoleon didn't bring thrush agents. Waverly's just like, oh, my most hated agent, Napoleon Solo. He's so mean to him in season 1.
I mean, arguably you can say that it continues afterwards because, in season 2, he says that Napoleon is expendable. And in season 4, he really doesn't want Napoleon to save Ilya. I mean, Ilya gets captured in season 4. Napoleon wants to save him, and Waverly's like, just don't. Let him die.
Yeah, he's not a great boss.
Everyone at Uncle just sucks.
Yeah. Well, speaking of everyone at Uncle just sucking, Napoleon in this episode has his name on his suitcase. In really big letters on the tag, just Napoleon Solo. And it's like, you'd think if you were an international spy, you would want to not put a giant label on your suitcase that had your name on it.
And, Thrush knows his name and everything, so, they would just see the suitcase and be like, oh, just take that! Napoleon's here!
Probably the smartest thing Thrush could do would just be to have someone work at the airport, and, anytime they see Napoleon Solo on the flight list, be like, okay, let's blow that plane up!
Oh my god!
After all, only one airport exists in the Man from Uncle universe anyways.
Exactly!
Yeah.
And that the tag on his suitcase is how Chris, which is to say baby Kurt Russell, discovers Napoleon's name. So he starts talking to him at the airport after catching his name on the suitcase. So even a child can thwart Napoleon's secret identity.
Yeah, and also it says that he's from New York, and Chris is actually supposed to go to New York but he discovers that Napoleon is going to Norway, and he lies that he's also sent to Norway. So basically, he tags along with Napoleon because he knows that Napoleon will be able to get him back to New York.
This guy seems like a sucker. Yeah, so Chris, his whole deal basically is that he is an unaccompanied minor in the airport, and he's supposed to be going to visit his grandparents, but instead he decides to tag along on this dangerous journey to Norway with a spy, because he doesn't realize Napoleon's a spy, and basically he spends the rest of the episode trying to convince Napoleon that his mother is very lonely and very beautiful, and that therefore Napoleon should think very seriously about becoming his new father.
Oh.
And basically, in the end, it happens that Chris witnesses a guy being murdered, and it's the guy the guy who was supposed to bring Napoleon an artifact that they found.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And afterwards, Napoleon basically convinces Chris that it was only a game and it was a prank, and the guy didn't actually die.
I know. Like Napoleon says that, like, Mr. Henderson. By the way, I totally called he was gonna die. Just some random uncle agent shows up we've never seen before. Like he's a total red shirt. He's gonna die. So like when he gets stabbed, like Napoleon like says, and then like Chris describes it to Napoleon. Napoleon's like, oh, he does that prank. It was ketchup.
It's interesting because Napoleon is he's very gentle with Chris.
Yeah.
Like he tries really hard to be nurturing, but that's like not really his nature, and so he comes off very much as kind of a fun uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cute. Like it's like he's one of those people that like kids like, but he's not really like a kid person.
Yeah. Like he totally just gave me uncle vibes, like, watching this. Like, no pun intended, but, like, watching this, I just was like, yeah, he's acting like an uncle.
Yeah. There's a bunch of very cute little scenes with the two of them where, like, there's something like Napoleon at one point says like, oh, I owe it all to clean living, when Chris is saying that he's really good at something, and Chris's response is, my mom's always telling me to stay clean. And it's so cute because it's like he's not understanding that Napoleon is talking about like not smoking and drinking and having sex. And like from Chris's perspective, it's like, oh yeah, bathing is important. Mom always tells me that. Like, it's so cute. And then there's like a moment where Napoleon takes him out to dinner, and like the two of them are sitting at this fancy restaurant, and Chris just has like fistfuls of cupcakes.
Oh, yeah, and then when they have to finally say goodbye to each other at the very end of the episode, they have the cutest hug ever. I just was like,
it's really cute. They also did a really good job of, like, making Napoleon's affection for him seem, like, legitimate. Like, I feel that it's very easy to go kind of overly maudlin with child-centric episodes and have it be like, all adults instantaneously love all children, which is not true.
Yeah.
But, like, Napoleon kind of grows progressively fonder of Chris over the episode, and, like, by the time that they depart from each other, you get the feeling that he's like, oh no, I do really legitimately like that kid.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that. As someone who is not necessarily, like, really good with children under the age of 10. Like,
I'm saying because I find it easy to talking to children who are like teenagers or tweens, but not children who are small. And luckily, this is not an episode about a small child, so it's easier to watch and understand.
Yeah, like Kurt Russell isn't like a 4-year-old. Like,
yeah.
like
I'm
he's.
not exactly sure
Maybe
how
like
old his
11 or
character is
something like
supposed to
that.
be, because
I was thinking like tween.
Yeah.
I feel like, so, okay, as a 6th grade teacher, like, he behaves way too young to be a 6th grader.
Oh yeah, I haven't talked to a 6th grader in years, so.
But on the other hand, like, Kurt Russell himself is obviously, like, at least 11 or 12. I think he's probably supposed to be playing, like, 10. Because he still has that kind of, like, innocence where he's not picking up on some of the things that Napoleon is saying, and like the eating of all the food, and like he's still very wrapped up in the kind of like romance and adventure of the idea of being a spy. And I feel like that's all stuff that, like, once you start to tip into your tweens, starts to go by the wayside a little bit.
I mean, you sound...
Oh, yeah, because then you start...
You sound...
when you start getting older, like... you realize that being a spy actually is really dangerous.
Oh my god, that man really did die!
Unless you're Napoleon Solo and the plot revolves around you, so you never die.
No, but it's funny because you sound like 11-year-olds are like so world weary.
Yeah.
Well, I don't necessarily mean that they're worldly, but they're a little less golly. Like, there is still a little bit of like 1950s Leave It to Beaver attitude that Chris has, and I feel like that makes it hard for me to parse him as like older than 10.
Oh.
He's very cute, though. I don't really like children that much normally. Like, I don't want to be around children, but like I still like really liked him and found him really cute. So I think that's a good job.
Yes.
And like as someone who's around children a lot, I found him relatively like believable. So hey, it works from both sides.
And I also really appreciated how Napoleon tried to make it less traumatic to him, but at the same time, it was pretty difficult. I mean, when Chris saw the man getting stabbed at the airport, he got really distressed and upset. And afterwards, when Napoleon finds him on the plane, he's sitting alone, instead of actually joining Napoleon as he was planning before. And he's looking at the window and he doesn't really want to talk. But Napoleon then tries to make it seem like it was a joke, and it works. And I really appreciate it because people sometimes write children as if they're like absolutely oblivious to everything, and they don't understand what murder is.
Yeah.
Why did that man stop breathing, Mom?
Yeah, like when you're like,
is he taking a nap?
I mean, like a 10-year-old like understands death, so like it makes sense.
100%.
Yeah, it's not like a literal like a 2-year-old.
You know absolutely that if this episode had a 2-year-old in it, Napoleon would pick up the 2-year-old, hand it to the nearest airport person, and be done with the child.
Yeah.
He would be like, I don't know whose this is, but it's not mine, bye.
Yeah, you can't really go on any adventures with 2-year-olds. They're just gonna kind of cry and poop.
No, No, but also, like, it's pretty scary that Chris could actually travel on his own in the 60s.
Yeah, I don't know when you started to have the, like, specific laws for unaccompanied minors flying, but, like, nowadays you need to have, a bunch of stuff. Like, there's specific paperwork that needs to be done if you're an unaccompanied minor, and, like, you need to, like, have an adult, I think, check you in at the airport when you get there the first time, and I don't know, there's, like, a whole bunch of stuff you have to do. Whereas Chris just kind of, like, rolled up and was like, yo, I actually am supposed to be going to Norway. Haha, funny mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I even rode the train when I was younger, and I had to have, like, an adult, take me to the train station and stuff, and check me in. So I imagine it's even more intense for flying on a plane.
And meanwhile, Napoleon is like, here, take the money and go buy yourself a ticket to New York.
So one of you mentioned earlier that Mr. Henderson is there to try to give Napoleon an artifact. We haven't talked about the artifact.
Yeah.
So supposedly there is a way to figure out where the evil old-making gas is by, quote, marrying the maiden. And there's
that confused me so much.
Device. It looks like a lug nut. Like, literally, they give Napoleon like a lug nut, and they're like, marry the maiden, and he's like, I have no idea what this means. And so there's a couple things about this that I really enjoyed. The first thing is, there is actually another moment where he's talking to Ilya over the communicator, and Ilya says something about what this artifact is, and he says, it's like a ring for a finger, but too large. And
God! I didn't realize! No!
I just am like, that's how you chose to phrase that, Ilya?
It took me a moment.
Like, he could have just said, it's like a ring, but it's like a ring for a finger, but too large. And I was like, is that purposeful? Was that intentional? Or was that just like me totally reading things inappropriately?
You never know with Man from U.N.C.L.E, because they literally do have some inappropriate jokes in there that are clearly intentional. And then there's other stuff you're just like, is that? But they have some stuff that's clearly intentional, so you're like, is it all intentional?
Yup. And then the other thing that I really liked was later on when they actually figure out what Marry the Maiden is, which is to say that Napoleon needs to put this lug nut on a statue of the Maiden of Norway, and then use the telescope that's inside the ring to be able to find a cave where the evil gas is hidden. It's very silly. But the thing that's important is that he takes a second to look at his hands and, like, looks back and forth between his left hand and his right hand before he puts the ring on the maiden, which I thought was really interesting because I think that makes it really clear that Napoleon has never been married.
Oh, yeah.
So he does not remember or know which finger a wedding ring goes on. And I bring this up only because there is something in one of the, like, not official, but one of the, like, supplementary bits of material that's been passed around, kind of like the MGM bios, that Napoleon was married and then his wife died tragically. And I feel like this is sort of in-episode evidence that, like, no, this man's not been married. He does not know where a wedding ring goes.
I mean, I've never been married, and I don't know which hand a wedding ring goes on. So, like, I think this shows that he's not been married.
Yeah, like, I am married, and I would not hesitate to tell you what hand the wedding ring is on, even
Which
if
hand
I
is
don't
it?
have my. It's left.
Okay.
Yeah, and also there's this kind of a joke. I mean, it's not really a joke, but that Napoleon says, marry the maiden in such a tone every time that it's like, I'm never gonna.
Yeah, he really seems very distressed by this task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which actually is super funny considering how many episodes there are where Napoleon is attempted to be shotgun weddinged.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like he's seeing his future. He's like, oh god, I'm gonna be put in this position later, aren't I? Where strange women during a mission are going to try to marry me.
It happened 3 times, I can tell you.
That is truly ridiculous that there are 3 separate episodes where someone attempts to marry Napoleon against his will.
And each time, Ilya saves him.
Ah, romance isn't dead.
Napoleon and Ilya are just they're like, Napoleon is your uncle, and then Ilya is his husband.
Yeah. Also, thematically, there's something kind of interesting near the end of this episode. So Chris, after they get back from this very dangerous adventure, is like, you know, I've decided actually that maybe you shouldn't marry my mom because being a spy is super dangerous, and like, I think you wouldn't ever be home. And he says she needs someone around to, you know, kiss and stuff, which is A, super, super cute, but B, I thought it was really interesting considering, like, the second to last episode of the series is about basically how uncle agents really aren't suited for long-term relationships with civilians. And I think that, like, I hadn't realized how early on in the series that they kind of start, like, bringing up this idea that it's like, his lifestyle is not suited for settling down. And I thought that was really interesting because it's much more subtle in, like, season 1 than it is, like, in that second to last episode of the series, but it's interesting that it's something that actually is a thread that carries through.
Yes, it's interesting because The Man from U.N.C.L.E. is actually the first American spy show, and at that time, spy genre wasn't as prominent as it is now, and I mean, all this proto-angst, like, it was pretty new, especially during season 1, so it took some real understanding of what it's like, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like, particularly considering how many episodes involve Napoleon and Ilya either, like, reuniting a woman with her husband or, like, getting 2 people together, like, it's very interesting how much the show is actually focused on, like, relationships, but not their relationships with other people. And
only with each other.
Just that. Well, yes, obviously it's focused on the relationship with each other. I mean,
Yeah,
you know.
not like with external people.
Yeah.
It just won't work out with external people. Yeah, I feel like I really did enjoy Finny Foot, even though it's not a Napoleon and Ilya episode. For a number of reasons, it's very cute. It has, you know, a silly but sort of entertaining plot. I feel like the only thing that kind of, like, really dings this one in my book is that the bad guys are 100% like terrible Asian stereotypes.
Oh, yeah,
and not only are they terrible Asian stereotypes, but that the general is played by a white guy.
Yeah, that's the worst thing about this episode. And like literally, like, the women in there, one of the women is like this total, like, exotic dragon lady, which is like this horrible old stereotype, and I'm just like, why?
Yeah, I have a lot of notes about this episode that are basically just like, I tuned out during another Yellow Peril scene.
Yeah.
Literally one of my notes is, more scary Asian people threaten Napoleon, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, if you can ignore the bad guys, it's a good episode.
Actually,
I do, however, really like near the end of the confrontation, the character that you mentioned, Logan, who is the sort of like
Mr.
exotic
Henderson.
assassin woman.
No, not Mr. Henderson. No.
Mr. Henderson is not the exotic assassin woman.
No. The woman.
Mr. Henderson is a redhead with a beard.
I don't think I even wrote... Oh yeah, her name is Tomo. I wrote down her name.
Tomo, yes. So Tomo near the end, Napoleon has a really super unkind line. Like he said, like the general dies and he turns to her and is like, aren't Japanese people supposed to kill themselves when their general dies? And like, what the hell, Napoleon? But her response is just kind of to roll her eyes, and she says, "Wrong century, Jack." It's so good. I'm like, okay, all right, Tomo is fine. The rest of the characters, they're not good, but Tomo, I will accept.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, even though Tomo is still stereotypical, she's a little bit better.
I got to say that I didn't even realize that the general was played by a guy who wasn't Asian. And I'm actually Asian, and it's very funny that I didn't even realize it. So maybe he did a good job.
I mean, I watched the episode, I literally was thinking, I'm like, this guy seems kind of white. Maybe he's like half Asian, half white, maybe. I gave the benefit of the doubt, and then I went to the credits and I saw his name, and I was like, that seems like a really white name. And I looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a white guy.
Yeah, he did, of course, unsurprisingly, as so many bald white men did during that time period, played the king in The King and I. So he apparently had a history of playing Asian men, even though he was white, but...
that's like the worst way to be typecast.
I'm looking at his page on IMDb, and he had played a lot of Asian characters. It's interesting. And I would like to talk about the actress who played Tomo. Her name is Tura Satano, and she's actually half Japanese. And one time I saw somebody say that she's not Asian. I mean, somebody who was watching the show. And it was very weird because she's obviously Asian. And she's also pretty iconic because she played in a part in a movie that was called Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. And it was like an early slasher movie from the 60s. It was very exploitative, but at the same time, it's one of these iconic movies that are remembered, and it has a cult status at the moment. I haven't seen it personally, but my friend watched it and she liked it. So, she's a pretty notable actress, I would say. She also seems pretty badass because she apparently was not only a dancer, but also she had some martial arts skills, and that's why she had a lot of parts that had to do with it. She also had a part in The Girl from U.N.C.L.E, so it wasn't her last time appearing on U.N.C.L.E shows.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked her up as well, not because I didn't know whether she was Asian or not, but just because I was interested in who she was. I also have not seen Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, but I've heard of it in terms of sort of the like action exploitation genre that was big in the 60s and 70s. So extra homework for us, apparently.
I actually loved the way she looked in this episode because she had such extra outfits that were like super unusual.
Yeah, she wears some really fabulous things.
Yeah. And she wore trousers in this episode, and I got to see something that I never noticed before, but as I was rewatching the Man from Uncle episodes for this podcast, I noticed that almost in every episode there were women wearing trousers at some point or another.
That's interesting because I haven't really been paying much attention to that. The one time that I really did notice that was in the 1929 Fritz Lang film Woman in the Moon. Sounds off topic, but I swear it's not. Where one of the women on the spaceship actually wore an outfit that looked really comfortable and practical. So I was like, good job, Fritz Lang, or whoever designed the costumes for this, because I imagine he didn't, or maybe, I don't know. But
I mean, it was probably a woman, to tell the truth.
Yeah,
Usually
maybe
that was the case during.
Because she wore like these like shorts and stuff, and like this shirt, and like these really loose shorts, and like this shirt that had like a tie and everything. And I just was like, that looks pretty comfortable. That's good for flying in space. But like when it comes to Man from Uncle, I haven't really been noticing it that much. But maybe I need to look closer.
Yes, actually, if you look at it, Marion Raven, she wears pants in her first episode when they go to Yugoslavia. Also in the Green Opal affair, Miss Carter also wears like this what's called jumpsuit or whatever, and Gervais Ravel also wears trousers. And basically, it's like almost in every episode there is at least one scene in which women wear pants or trousers. I always mix these words because in British English and American English they have different meanings. And
I know.
Yeah. And
I know.
For both Logan and I, pants are not underwear.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
they're not underwear for us.
Pants are what you put on over your underwear.
For me, pants are sometimes underwear, so...
Yeah, because I've noticed that you seem to be more, like lean towards British English.
Yeah, that's because I basically learned English from watching British movies, so... Basically, I wanted to say that later in the show, it's not that often that you see women wearing pants.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That it becomes less.
So if you watch,
I don't know what the word I would use.
If you really pay attention to the early episodes of season 1, they seem quite progressive in some ways, but also very regressive in other ways, because
yeah,
in seasons in seasons 2, 3, and 4, like for example, most Asian women you see are innocent, and they are actually pretty interesting characters. And in season 1, it's not that. So it gets less progressive in some ways and more progressive in other ways. It's fine.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
it is interesting. Yeah. When you mentioned women wearing pants, I just thought of Gervais's sexy jumpsuit.
Yeah. Sexy jumpsuit.
Is there anything else they want to bring up for the Finny Foot affair?
I think I'm good on that.
And if you're wondering where the name comes from, because the Finny Foot affair is a weird name, it comes from apparently a seal having a finny foot, something along those lines.
But also, Chris actually has a toy that has a secret hand coming out of it. It's like
yeah, because like
yeah.
Because it's a seal that first gets the rapid aging virus, and then they find the dead seal and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's where Finny Foot comes from.
Yeah, but also I always associated it with the story because it has like a hand coming out of it, and it's pretty like a funny hand, I would say. And I also think that we should mention that there was a dog in this episode, and Kurt Russell had some very cute scenes with the dog.
Oh yeah, this episode has a cute kid and a cute dog.
Yeah.
It's amazing that it's actually not super annoying.
Yeah, like you would think this would just be annoyingly cute and just be like, oh god, this is so saccharine, please stop, but it isn't.
Yeah, and also like the dog's there for scenes that are pretty gruesome, and actually like people get killed in the scenes, and the dog is there to sort of like soften the blow, I would say.
Yeah, there's basically like a golden retriever just like standing there wagging its tail as a bunch of people get shot.
So they basically keep this balance because otherwise it would be, I think that seems pretty bad for Chris' experience, but as they shot it seems more okay, I would say, something like that.
Alright, well, the second in our series of 3 episodes is another very low Ilya episode, the Neptune Affair. So, in the Neptune Affair, we start with a sequence where we actually see Ilya in uniform in the Soviet Union somewhere.
In uniform.
And he is investigating missiles that have been shot from somewhere they believe in the United States to the Soviet Union, where they are spreading essentially a mold that is damaging crops.
Fungus.
And making it so that they can't harvest wheat, and so that they are unable to, basically, I mean, they'll have a famine. And so what ends up happening in this episode is that Ilya and Napoleon have to separate because Napoleon is sent to investigate the missiles themselves to see where they're being shot from, to figure out who's doing it and why, and Ilya is sent to the Soviet Union to investigate the sites where they're being shot to, and to help prepare basically for any fallout from this. And it's really interesting because this is probably the one episode that really super directly addresses the Cold War. Because there is a scene briefly where Ilya and Napoleon meet back up. And when they're talking, Ilya is really worked up, and he discusses the fact that he's really pissed off that it's probably Americans who are doing this, but at the same time, he's really afraid of retaliation against the entirety of America when it's probably not the American government that did it. So it's interesting, and I think totally destroys the idea that Ilya was some kind of defector. And the fact that this episode was that early on in the series and kind of destroys that idea that he's a defector really makes me wonder why anybody ever believed that.
I think that idea just came from it just came from the fact that they hadn't been exposed to man. I think it comes from the pre-home video Dark Ages, where they hadn't seen the show. They hadn't seen the show in so long they couldn't go back and nitpick the episodes and be like, oh yeah, Ilya's not a defector. So that's probably true. Where it came from.
So Napoleon in this episode goes to investigate a scientist who was involved in the biological research that probably led to this mold that's being sent via missile. And in the process, he has to go undercover as a wheat grower and he does a really terrible accent, and he gets on a yacht, and then he ends up with the daughter of the scientist infiltrating an underwater base and preventing the missiles from being sent out and destroying all of the wheat in Russia. So, it's an interesting episode. I feel like it's one of the ones that is most interesting politically in the first season, and I also dig the underwater base.
Oh yeah, the underwater base is awesome. They go down in this elevator to it, and then like it clunks to the bottom, and it's like kind of scary, but it's also kind of cool. And then they ask Napoleon for his gun, and the friggin' like compartment swings out of the wall of the elevator, and I'm just like, oh, this is so cool.
So there used to be a ride in Disney World that is gone now, that had a very similar, like, entrance to this underwater base. Like, you fake went down in an elevator to, like, Seabase Alpha, and, like, there was all this stuff where, like, they talked about, like, all the research that's going on in Seabase Alpha, and so I had, like, this weird nostalgia trip watching this episode, remembering being, like, 8 years old in Epcot. Unfortunately, this ride has since been torn down, so you can't be on it. Sorry.
That ride sounds very fun. I'm sorry it's not existing anymore.
Yeah.
So, I guess the most important thing to talk about in this episode is Napoleon's disguise. But, yeah.
Harvey Mueller.
Yeah. But first, I think we got to talk about Ilya a bit, because, as you said, it's a pretty common establishing scene. And it's funny seeing Ilya somewhere in Russia being in a uniform. I mean, that's where him serving in the Navy actually comes from. It was also pretty good seeing some actual Soviet sailors in uniforms, because the uniforms were pretty accurate, I would say. And
that's surprising.
I mean, I'm not sure about, like, historically if they were from the 60s, but I'm sure they were used at some point. So, like,
yeah, maybe they might have had like some Soviet like Navy uniforms lying around from like some like other like project, and they're like, oh, here you go.
Yeah, it's pretty good that they did it. And like, yeah, it is very concerned about this whole mutilation thing, and it made me think about Doctor Strangelove again, because it's
yeah.
It's similar, but at the same time, I guess at that time everybody was thinking about something like that possibly happening, because it seemed pretty likely. Like, if the USA or the USSR acted too directly, it would lead to very bad consequences, and luckily it never happened. I mean, on the big scale. So, again, it's funny because we can actually see U.N.C.L.E. Acting as a peacemaker between these two nations, and it goes to show what the purpose of the organization actually is, because I mean, if anybody was still confused about U.N.C.L.E, the USSR actually participates in it, and it's also interested in maintaining peace between the two nations. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think that's actually a surprisingly sharp political statement for an American TV show to make in 1965. Yes. Like, the idea that, like, actually, there are people in Russia. People with feelings who also don't want nuclear war.
Yeah.
You know, I think it also goes. It also, like, even though it's really obvious in this episode, that even goes for like the positive portrayal of Ilya in general, and like how he's friends with Napoleon and that sort of thing. Like that's really cool, because actually, when I was introducing The Man from U.N.C.L.E. to one of my friends that's outside the fandom, well, I actually, like, I told her about, like, oh yeah, people ship Napoleon and Ilya. She was like, is it like a reluctant, like, alliance thing, and they grow to like each other? I'm like, no, they're just BFFs.
They're just two men who get a kick out of each other.
Yeah.
And also, like, we got to say that Ilya has an unbuttoned shirt. Unbuttoned shirt in his scene.
Yeah, during the one scene where Ilya and Napoleon are, like, actually in the same room in this episode, Ilya is, as we both previously mentioned, he's very agitated, but he also is walking around with his shirt partially unbuttoned, which I think is mostly entertaining because, like, as a character, he seems kind of, like, tightly laced. But, this happens not infrequently in the show, where Ilya is just like, oh no, my top buttons come undone.
Oh no, what will I
do? Is it hot in here, Napoleon?
It's only hot because I'm in here.
It also shows that Ilya is actually quite relaxed in his working environment, and he can get emotional and stuff, which is, again, just proving the point that he is a nice prince.
Okay, whenever someone says ice prince, I just think of, like, Elsa for some reason, and, like, I think, like, Elsa, like, as a prince.
I actually think of the Ice King from Adventure Time.
I don't know which one's worse.
What I'm hearing is, if you take Elsa and the Ice King and you meet in the middle, you get Ilya.
Oh no! But I mean, yeah, Elsa and the Ice King are actually pretty emotional. So why not? Yeah, so we got to talk about how Napoleon gets hypnotized, I guess, in order to really retain his cover as Harry Muller.
Oh yeah, and then there's like a thing where, like, basically if he says, like, goodbye Harvey Muller, like, he'll like, I kind of doesn't he, like, believe that he's Harvey Muller for like a few hours after saying that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was like, wow. And then right before he gets some evil dude, like, does, like, how do they even apply this to him? It's like this weird little swab. Like, what is? I was really confused.
They somehow knock him out by very gently touching a cotton ball to his hand.
Yeah, I was really confused. I was just like, what?
It's supposed to be like a toxin because they actually had this whole ploy with I mean, they obviously did it deliberately in order to knock him out. And so the cotton swab was probably soaked in something that was like a sleeping mixture or something like that. So
yeah, and because it's spy universe, like, sleeping things, like sleeping mixtures, like, work immediately.
Yeah.
Boom, you're dead. Not really dead, but basically dead.
But, like, there are some poisons that will work pretty quickly if you apply them to blood. I mean,
yeah, but in, like, spy universe, like, you just, like, there's, like, sleeping, like, there's, like, you can touch a little swabs to your skin, and boom, you're asleep. You can put, like, you can have, like, some gas into your face, boom, you're asleep.
Well, I mean, it's the same logic as, like, you can instantaneously knock someone out by, like, gently karate chopping their shoulder.
Yeah!
Yeah, and
Napoleon's amazing at that.
I mean, as somebody who suffers from insomnia sometimes, I had this thought. Just now, like, oh, I could use this like mixture. But then I remembered that actually the next morning Napoleon felt really bad, and he had a bad headache and stuff, and I wouldn't actually use it.
Yeah, it's like when you take like too many melatonin pills, and then you wake up in the morning, you're just like, oh god, why did I do that? You sleep amazingly, and then when you wake up, you feel like absolute trash.
So the persona that Napoleon affects in this episode that he is hypnotized into, Harvey Muller, it's really interesting because he does sort of like a southern-ish, midwestern-ish accent for the majority of the episode, but he slips a bunch of times, and like each time he slips, he becomes more like a rural Canadian accent. And it's like, by the end of it, he's like a character from Letterkenny. It's really weird. And there's this wonderful scene at one point where, like, after he wakes up from being, magically put to sleep with a cotton ball, he looks around the boat and is like, wait, none of the people who are here on this boat right now are the people who were here on this boat last night. And, the bad guys are like, oh, no, you're just imagining that. It's because you drank so much. And his response is, Mrs. Muller's boy is one mixed up cookie. Which is
mixed up cookie.
Mixed up cookie. Like, I don't think that's a phrase. Like, I don't think that's definitely a mixed metaphor of some kind.
I think that's just maybe Harvey Muller just heard that growing up from like his mom and thought it was normal language, and then realized that it's not. Because I have a phrase that I learned from my dad that I thought was actually used by people, and then I learned it's not a real word, and it's just my dad being weird. It's the word drinker to describe a water bottle.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, that's not...
Yeah, I thought that was normal. I thought everyone called water bottles drinkers, and then I, like, one time remarked about it, and someone would just look at me like I was absolutely insane. My dad only called them that because he grew up on a farm, and they would have, like, the tanks that they would use to give water to the animals. They called them drinkers. So, like, he started calling water bottles that, too. So then I thought it was normal. So then So maybe it's that situation, but I'm probably overthinking it, and he's just it's just written weirdly. But you know what? There is an in-universe explanation.
In the movie Summertime with Katharine Hepburn, she calls a boy cookie, and I guess some people use this word as an endearing term.
Like, I've heard smart cookie, but not mixed up cookie.
Yeah, it's usually used for smart or tough. Like, you can be a smart cookie or a tough cookie.
Mm-hmm.
You can be any cookie you like.
Napoleon Solo says you can be any cookie you like.
Oh, yeah. So, in the beginning of the episode, when Napoleon, Harvey Muller, is on his yacht, he finds a man who randomly appears from under the water, and he basically jumps to save him, and this whole scene just had me screaming.
Yeah, because like he goes out on like this like. It's like a life preserver, but like it's not like a normally shaped one. It's like
looks like a surfboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I was just looking at it, I just was like, what kind of life preserver is this? And it has, like, no rope tying it to the boat, so, like, he just goes off of it into the water. It's, oh god, I hated watching that, because Robert Vaughn, I don't like watching him in the water. And that was horrible to watch, but he finds this man that came up from the depths of the ocean, and he puts the man on the life preserver, and then, like, Napoleon starts, he puts... It's hard to explain. Like, he kind of, like, rests his face.
He proceeds to ride the man.
Yeah.
With his face pressed into his butt cheeks.
Yeah, Napoleon, like, puts his face into this random man's butt cheeks and then, like, paddles the board along.
Also, his paddling is so ineffective. Like,
I know!
It's so clearly a man who cannot and has never really swam doing this. Yeah. And so, like, Napoleon is, like, barely dog paddling with his face, like, gently resting on a man's cheeks.
Cheeks!
It's so hilarious and bizarre.
I mean, actually, there was a scene in which Robert was swimming in this episode, and he just had his head completely underwater while he was swimming, and, like, does he know that people normally don't do
it?
That's how you drown.
Yeah.
And then, like, when Napoleon and Mr. Muller and the random guy, like, they find when they get, like, rescued, like, and then, like, rescued, and then, like, the plot ensues, Napoleon, like, totally, like, fully, like, goes on top of the other man's body, like, he's about to hump him, and he just holds on while, like, the boat, like, pulls him into the rope, and I'm just like, this is so wrong looking, I hate this.
I feel like it's particularly funny because, like, when they do pick them up, the other guy whose name I'm forgetting, the one who is dating
Gage?
Gabe.
Gabe.
So
I said Gage.
Yeah. Gabe is like, do you know that guy? It's like, nope, actually, he doesn't. He does not know that guy. And like, he's asking that actually for a plot reason, but, like, in the context of, like, random sailor finds, like, another man in the ocean riding another dude like a surfboard. It's just like, you know him? Nope. And we were strangers up until about 2 minutes ago when I squished my face into his butt. I noticed something about this episode that was driving me bonkers. When they go down to the nautical base, there's a whole bunch of scenes where the word hydro is dubbed over something.
Yes.
And so there's, like, there's a guy named Dr. Foster who's one of the doctors who's working on it, and at one point he says something like, oh yes, at the bottom of the ocean, the crystallized hydro system full of hydro gas. And, like, this happens, like, 14 times. Where, like,
I noticed that
people
too.
I
can tell you.
People are talking about gas, and, like, every time they're talking about this gas, someone very poorly and loudly overdubs hydro. I really want to know what they were saying before they changed it to hydro.
Maybe it was, like, a trademark or something.
Look,
that would make sense.
I can tell you what it was. So, originally it was actually the word freon, as in the gas that is used in fridges. And
I mean, freon is a real gas. Yeah. Hydro gas is not.
And they thought that it was okay to use it, but at the same time, the fridge technology was pretty new back then, and when they learned about it, I mean, the refrigerator manufacturers, they really hated it, and they asked them to changed it, and basically they did it like they had only one day to redub it, I think, and they only were able to get one actor plus Robert Vaughn. So one of the actors who was in this episode had to dub every time somebody apart from Napoleon said word Freon, and it basically. It wasn't the actor who played Dr. Foster. So
That's so cool that you know this. You have such an amazing amount of uncle knowledge that I'm just like, oh my god.
because I know nothing else in this world.
Well,
are you an
I'm
uncleologist?
pleased that I know why. Because that was really, like, bugging me that it was like, what were they saying? Was it a naughty word? Did they realize? But it was just Freon.
Yeah. And also, like, Dr. Foster was played by John Banner, who is better known for his part in Hogan's Heroes, in which he played Sergeant Schultz, I think his name was. He's a very funny actor, and he's a joy to watch, really. I think it was very fun seeing him in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Also, his part was very funny because his main characteristic was that he kept laughing all the time, but at the same time he was very bloodthirsty.
Yeah, there's a really wonderful bit where he's like, he's telling Napoleon and Felicia, who is the daughter of the scientist who Napoleon's looking for, about all the things they're doing in this underwater lab, and he's really, like, he's super excited about it. He's really pleased with, he's like really happy to be able to tell someone about this. And Napoleon tries to kill him, and over the intercom, one of the other scientists is like, Dr. Foster, watch your back. And, like, after that, he just keeps shooting Napoleon these glances like, I trusted you. I thought you cared about my hydro gas.
This is perfect.
So yeah, he's a super interesting character. I like him a lot.
Okay, so, like, when Napoleon was going to the house to talk to the doctor while he thought the doctor was there, he just goes in and just takes an apple out of the fruit bowl and eats it! He doesn't know these people! He just helps himself to their fruit? Why would you do that?
Well, that's because he was in character of Harvey Muller, who is super entitled and like a spoiled rich boy.
Even though Harvey Muller is just like some country kid, I guess he just doesn't have enough manners to know that you shouldn't just go and eat out of someone else's fruit bowl that you don't know.
He's also supposed to be very rich, so it makes sense that he acts like a bastard.
Wait, so is Harvey Muller supposed to be rich?
Yeah?
Yeah, he's supposed to be like a wheat scion. Like, he's someone who has recent wheat money.
I thought he just was some random country boy.
No, they said something like Harvey Muller, who's a wheat tycoon, and he loves wheat, wine, and women in that order.
It's just wheat and women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was also a pretty interesting contrast in this episode because when Napoleon is acting like Harvey Muller, he's pretty bad with ladies, I would say. He actually used the word females like twice.
Yeah,
I know.
I thought that was super interesting because
like usually like when it's not used in like a scientific setting, calling women females kind of has a sort of like derogatory feel to it, at least to me.
But
So-
100%.
Mhm.
That's what you say when you are like a dude who thinks that the reason women don't sleep with you is because you play video games.
I mean,
Oh, incels.
yeah. But also, like, at the same time, when he actually drops his cover and shows who he really is to the daughter of Dr. Lavamore, he becomes very different, and he's pretty empathetic towards her, and I mean, they get along pretty well.
Yeah, it's very clear that all of these sort of icky things that Napoleon does they're supposed to be Harvey.
Yeah.
Which is, I
Mhm.
mean, I think that it's really kind of cool because,
Yeah.
again, like thinking about like who are the main sort of American spy ideals at this time period. Like, I mean, it's to some extent, it's definitely going to be James Bond, who is
Mhm.
not all that empathetic to women, and Napoleon is actually usually very empathetic to women.
Yep.
And you get the feeling that, like, part of why he sleeps with so many women is just because he likes them.
Yeah. I think, I imagine, like, when he sleeps with women, he spends as much time sleeping with them as just chatting with them about their lives.
100%. Napoleon is, like, probably the king of pillow talk.
Yeah.
I mean, I have had cousin that he had sisters when he was growing up, and he just likes talking to women. So it makes sense. I mean, yeah. So at the end of the episode, there's this very strange scene in which this evil guy from Thrush and Napoleon get locked in some kind of a room that isn't supposed to be open like ever, and I didn't really understand why it even exists.
I'm pretty sure the guy was named, like, Vimo.
I don't know. I mean, it
I'm like,
sort of makes sense because they deal with a gas that's apparently poisonous, and maybe they had this room in order to seal off if there's a gas leak or something like that. But at the same time, this room doesn't have any oxygen when it's locked down.
I'll go into the sealed room to prevent myself from dying of deadly gas.
Yeah.
Oh wait, now I'm dying because there isn't enough of a non-deadly gas.
And, like, adding on to it, like, if they did have the sealed room, you would imagine that there would be, like, a lot of security around it. No, you can just open it like any other room and just go in, and then you're stuck in there.
I think it actually had an open door, and it was like inviting. So
Yeah, it is kind of a weird scene.
And basically, they get locked in and they can't go out, and they have oxygen only for 18 minutes to live.
Yeah.
And in the end, this Thrush guy has to open the door in order to survive. So that's how Napoleon gets out and can stop this whole plot. Oh my god, it's winter already. I mean, I have a very strong wind and it's super cold. I'm going to close the window.
Okay.
So
yeah, the whole scene with Napoleon attempting to convince Gabe, basically, like, to have mercy on the scientist who wants to use these missiles to create a new world order, is interesting because we don't really ever get much of an explanation as to why Gabe cares about this guy. But it's interesting because Napoleon is definitely using this guy in a way that is really interesting because, like, he's manipulating them into being kind to one another when in fact they're saying that, like, being kind to each other is weakness.
Yeah.
And, like, actually, it turns out that it is, because in manipulating them to be kind to one another, Napoleon is able to win. And I think that it's really interesting, mostly because one of the sort of recurring themes in the series is that anytime Napoleon or Ilya is faced with the decision of the mission or each other, they always pick each other. And so we have Napoleon, like, using that impulse against someone else, which seems really stone cold.
Yes, it really does, because, I think it's supposed to be that Gabe was kind of, like, educated and made a better person by U.N.C.L.E, which I actually looked up his name. So, that's why he's so attached to him, like a mentor figure or something like that, because Gabe actually has a fiancé, so I wouldn't actually shoot them or anything. But
Wait, do you ship Napoleon and Gabe?
No.
I heard it totally wrong.
Whether or not Gabe has some less than mentorly feelings for the older scientist that he saves.
And then actually...
Oh yeah, I see that.
Actually it happens so that Gabe accidentally kills this guy. And Napoleon is like, it's not time for feelings. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, he says, Gabe, this isn't any time for feeling anything.
Yes, and it was very weird because Napoleon gets super emotional whenever something bad happens to Ilya.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess that's part of why I thought the scene was interesting, was it's like Napoleon is like, I don't know whether it's irony here, or whether it's Napoleon actually knows that that is his own weakness, and therefore knows that he can use it against other people.
Maybe he does.
It's interesting.
At some point as well, this guy, the thrush guy, actually says that, like, you, with your weird value system, you actually think that every human life is valuable. That thrush guy says that to Napoleon because he's like, I don't think that every life is valuable. Like, I can die for my cause. It's the thrush guy who says it. And yeah, also I guess we got to mention that their plan was actually to cause this mutual destruction of the USSR and the USA, and establish a new world order with thrush from underwater. It really is like Dr. Strangelove in a way, because they had a similar plan. And speaking of Dr. Strangelove, in the FINNY food affair, we had to deal with the gas that was created by a Japanese scientist during the World War II, but it wasn't actually said that way. It was said during the last war, but obviously the last war is World War II. So it's basically we're still dealing with many plots that have to do with real things that happen in the world, but it will change pretty soon.
Yeah,
that goes away.
Even in the next episode, it goes away.
Yeah.
Although with the next episode, there is at least sort of it's one of those kind of. It's one of those uncle situations where they're talking about a country that is a stand-in for another country. Like, they're talking about, a mysterious Balkan state, and they don't get into what the Balkan state is, but,
they actually say the name of it, but it's not a real country.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but it's not a real place. And, so I feel like in season 1, if it's not about a real world event to some extent, then it's about an event that is referencing a real world event obliquely. Whereas once we get into season 2, it's almost all oblique references, and once you get into season 3, it's like, yeah, we're not even trying anymore, whatever. Someone has an evil gas somewhere, it's probably hippies.
hippies and rye bread and gorilla suits and
and exploding apples.
So I think I want to bring up this episode is that Heather comes back. Heather's in this episode, and there's this one scene where she's like in a bikini, just lounging around in the Uncle headquarters on like a beach chair while talking to Napoleon over the communicator, and I just was like, oh my god, what is happening? And she even has her uncle badge on her bikini, and I'm just like, what?
I mean, also at some point she's knitting and she has a dog by her side. So.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. It almost seems like there's like a running gag of just like secretaries just like doing like random things while talking to Napoleon over the spy phone.
But I actually I actually think it's the last episode when it happens, so we're gonna miss it.
Yes, I found that amusing.
I thought that was pretty cute. I appreciate the season 1 secretary gags. They kind of go away later.
Yes, I mean, afterwards, I'm pretty sure after this episode, it doesn't happen anymore. Because, as you might know...
that's too bad.
They used to order shows in, like, batches of 13 episodes. And we are almost done with the first 13 episodes. And after that... things change a bit. I mean, Edie becomes more of a character, and some of the gags go away, so it changes. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is like the first batch of episodes before they have the reaction of the public.
Yeah.
The reaction
the
of
public
oh
goes,
my god,
Ilya mad.
I mean, I love Ilya. I mean, that's how I feel about Ilya too. But you know.
So,
I totally get it.
I guess we can move on to the next episode now.
Oh, the next episode.
So, I won't lie, despite the fact that this is an episode that has literally no Ilya, the third episode that we're looking at, The Dove Affair, it's one of my favorite Man from U.N.C.L.E. episodes.
Yeah.
So, in The Dove Affair, Napoleon is sent to a named but fake Balkan nation.
It's called Cernia.
Cernia.
Of hernia.
Oh boy, Cernia. So he goes to Cernia, and his mission is to pick up a lapel pin shaped like a dove encrusted with diamonds that has been left on the corpse of of Cernia's recently departed premier, who seemed to have been a relatively beloved leader, who seemed to be doing things that Uncle kind of agreed with in terms of like the country's the changes it was making, and he needs to get this pin, and he actually, as he's being dropped off in Cernia, he doesn't know yet why he needs to get this pin. He's just been told that he does need to, and he's told that he needs to meet with a Cernian agent who works for Kreb, called Satine. And Satine is supposed to help smuggle him back out of Cernia once he has the dove pin. So there are two major complications here. The first one is that he sort of initially unintentionally and then later intentionally gets involved with a school tour group led by a teacher named Ms. Taub. This school tour group is initially kind of in his way, but then he sort of uses them to his advantage later on. And the other issue is that Satine is kind of a double-crossing jerk. And he is... he, instead of smuggling Napoleon out, throws him in a river. So... The rest of the episode is spent with Napoleon trying to keep his hands on this dove pin and keep the pin out of Satine's hands. While Satine is kind of playing both sides, he is telling the new premier that the new premier has to pretend to be agreeing... We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So he tells the new premier that the best thing to do is to pretend he agrees with this cabinet member who works for Thrush so that he'll be safe, but that in the meantime Satine is going to get the dove pin back and therefore be able to both kind of align with Uncle's goals and also to prevent the country from falling into Thrush's hands. So Satine is kind of a free agent in a way, and the most important thing about him is that he is played by Ricardo Montalban, which is to say, Khan!
Also my grandma's celebrity crush.
And he is a delight. And he and Robert Vaughn just have absolutely crackling chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
And frankly, it's hard not to feel like something's going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot of touching. There's I got so much tension between them, and and by tension, yeah, I mean that kind of tension. I just was like, this is the same realm of tension that I get when Napoleon is flirting with some Thrush woman.
Yeah.
It's kind of it has the same sort of vibe.
It does.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Not only is there a lot of touching, but just a lot of their dialogue is really loaded. And they make a lot of interesting faces at each other. And one of the things that I think is sort of most delightful about this episode, and this is whether you take it from kind of a shipping perspective or not, is that they're really impressed with each other.
Yes, absolutely.
They appreciate each other's abilities as spies, and even as they continuously one-up one another, every time they get screwed over, they kind of look at the other oh, you're good.
Yeah.
And it's just they have a lot of respect for each other, even if they're kind of there's a lot of sort of smoldering, simmering, oh, do I hate you? Do I want to put my hands on you? Kind of feelings.
Yeah, and literally Satine at one point says, from now on, whatever we do together. And I'm just what?
And then they go to the bathroom together.
Yeah.
No, really, they really do.
And they make love lines. And they are overheard by a lady on the radio, and it's all very kinky.
Oh yeah. Some of the students, they have a radio, and the teacher, Miss Taub, takes it away. But then when she listens on the radio, she hears Napoleon and Satine fighting and wrestling, but it sounds kind of wrong. It doesn't sound like fighting and wrestling.
Well, I also just really appreciate... So, there's two boys who have been playing with these walkie-talkies, and one of them is I hid mine in the bathroom, which, first off, why? Why did you hide your walkie-talkie on in the bathroom? What is wrong with you? Why do you want to hear people pee?
Because teenagers...
So I don't know that part. Like I get that it's necessarily for plot reasons, but it's like really that's what you're gonna do with your walkie-talkies? Okay. So anyway, the two of them fight in this bathroom, but the way they fight is so dumb because it's in a bathroom, so they just kind of like smack each other while being very, very close. And then they give up because it's like a bathroom is a dumb place to have a fight, and they decide to talk it out instead. And
it's not like it's a big, expansive public restroom that has lots of open space. It's a train bathroom.
It's a train bathroom. Also, I noted that at the end of the train bathroom conversation where, like, okay, so they fight and then they give up on the fighting and then they decide to actually, like, talk through what their issues are. Like, they come to an understanding and an agreement, and at the end of it, Napoleon does what I can only describe as the slow cat blink. Where, like, you very slowly sort of, like, close your eyes while looking at something you like and trust. And it's like, you see the moment on Napoleon's face where he's like, yeah, no, I'm super attracted to this guy.
They even, like, there's, like, a scene where, like, they're walking together, and, like, they, like, walk with the exact same steps with each other, and I'm just like, oh.
Also, like, there's just, they are pressed together for most of the episode, and it's, like, supposed to be I'm keeping an eye on you kind of thing, but it's like, okay, you don't have to keep an eye on each other with your arms. Like...
Keep an arm on each other.
Yeah, and so, like, they drink tea at one point, and they're, like, literally their arms are touching. They sit in a booth together, and their arms are touching. Like, they are on top of each other the whole episode, and it's delightful.
Yeah. So, I guess I'll tell you about my exposure to Ricardo Montalban, because I actually haven't seen a lot of Star Trek. And... I know him first and foremost as the grandfather from Spy Kids. Have you seen Spy Kids?
Correct.
Have you seen...
You know, I really like the idea that actually maybe that just is Satine.
Yes.
Oh my god!
But
This is the strangest crossover ever.
At the same time, Spy Kids are Mexican, I think, and Satine is Eastern European, so it's pretty weird.
You can make it work. You can make it work. You can try hard enough if you believe in it.
Maybe Satine's parents are Mexican expats.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
And also, I got to say that
it's very
there's this one cartoon that I absolutely love, and it's actually my favorite cartoon ever. It's called Freakazoid. So do you know that in the 90s Steven Spielberg was producing cartoons? Like the best one, the best known one is Animaniacs. I'm pretty sure you have...
Ricardo Montalban was in Animaniacs?
Yes. No,
okay, I didn't know that.
No.
Yeah,
he was on another show that was also produced by Steven Spielberg, and it's called Freakazoid. It's about teen...
Oh, okay, I was like, because I grew up with Animaniacs. I didn't watch Freakazoid, but I watched Animaniacs. I was like, Animaniacs, what?
Yeah, so basically, Freakazoid is this teenage superhero, and he's a lot like Deadpool, I guess. I mean, it's a very funny show, and it has a lot of gags, and his main villain is voiced by Ricardo Montalban, and it's hilarious. And I actually have seen people shipping them, and I absolutely get where it comes from. So it's just something that happened a lot, I guess, with Ricardo Montalban playing character and later being shipped with the main heroes. Because he really has this kind of energy. He is a lot of fun to watch, and he radiates this confident, like humorous energy that's very attractive to many people, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, he's also just one of those actors who I think has a lot of, like, natural chemistry with other people.
Yes.
Like, he's
Yeah.
he's very charming.
Yeah.
You know, he has that kind of, like, that affect where you feel like he's capable of getting along with other people and
Yeah.
not in a way that feels forced.
Absolutely.
Like, you just kind of feel like I feel like people use the phrase, like, he's the kind of guy you'd want to get a drink with.
Oh yes, absolutely, yes. That's right. And I mean, Napoleon basically has pretty similar energy, and the way they get along is very interesting, because I think that they are pretty similar in, like, as
I
as
find it
characters.
super funny that you said that, because my husband watched this episode with me earlier today when we were rewatching it. And my husband is heterosexual. He does not have any interest in shipping. He does not have any interest in Slash. And I was saying something about, like, the sort of chemistry between the characters, and he's like, yeah, but they're the same kind of person. And
Yes!
I was like, huh? He was like, well, they have the same sort of energy. He was like, it's more like an Ocean's 11 kind of thing, where it's like a bunch of chaotic people who are, like, all just a little bit on the side of NAPOLEON. And I was like, oh my god, you're right. So, yeah, you're correct. Like, it's this feeling of, like, part of the reason they seem to get along, even though they're not supposed to, is that they're very much the same kind of guy.
Yeah, they both have that sort of, like, intense type of energy that, like, and also, like, and also sort of like, not, I don't mean intense in, like, as in, like, steely or anything. I mean intense as in, like, they're just, I don't really know what I mean.
I get it.
I'm trying to phrase it, but, like, the right words aren't quite coming. They have this, it's not coming. Presence! Yes, that's presence. Good. They have the same sort of presence that, like, to just, like, it just creates so much, like, energy between them that it's just, like, captivating to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, it's the reason why I cannot really ship them, like, apart from this one incident, because they basically wouldn't really find anything new in each other, I would say.
Oh yeah, this is 100% like making out in a train bathroom kind of shipping, yes. Not like this could never work as a relationship.
Oh yeah, there's no long-term relationship from this. Yeah. They literally are just making out in the train bathroom and then it's done.
Yeah. Well, in one of the other things I actually do really like about this episode is the woman who overhears them having a fight in a train bathroom, Mrs. Taub. She's the teacher for this school group that Napoleon keeps running into. And she's a really interesting character. I like her. Yeah. She's not an innocent who is paired off at the end. She is not, she's not roped into the affair. She actually volunteers. Mm-hmm. And she is, she figures everything out on her own. Like, she is able to kind of piece together what's going on and, like, confronts Napoleon about this. Like, she is not told about Uncle or what Napoleon's job is. She overhears it and she kind of puts two and two together. So she's very atypical, I think, in a lot of ways for, like, the innocence. And she's a little bit older as well. So yeah. I really like her. And the children that she has with her on this school trip are the worst.
Yeah.
They're so awful. Also, they're, like, clearly 25 and supposed to be, like, 16. And so it also, I'm like, come on, you know how to act better than this. Stop throwing your walkie-talkies around and listening to people pee.
So, speaking of, Yeah, go on.
Doesn't Satine say something about, like, how, like, he and Napoleon compliment each other? Like, some sort of, like, there's, like, he's, like, pointing to, like, these condiments on the table. I can't remember what they are.
Ah, yeah.
Like,
It's salt and pepper.
Yeah, there's salt and pepper. I was,
Yeah.
like, thinking I was thinking maybe there was something else, but, yeah, there's salt and pepper. And he was talking about how they, like, compliment each other. And I just was like, what?
Yeah.
He says something like, one preserves and one seasons, and he, like, bonks the little salt and pepper together on his plate. Now, to be fair, he also, in this same conversation, attempts to poison Napoleon, so, you know, like, don't trust Satine!
That whole analogy was actually about their organizations, not about them specifically. Because...
yeah, I was probably about their organizations, and I just was, like, having shipping goggles, being like, oh, they compliment each other.
Well, he also...
says, like...
The language he uses purposefully obscures that, I think. Like, he is definitely talking about, he's talking about uncle and, I guess, whatever Kreb is. And he is saying, you know, that, like, they have different functions, but the same goal, basically. And, but the way he says it, he does actually specifically use you and I and we.
Yeah.
And I think that he's using metonymy here. He's like, each of them is a stand-in for their organization, but at the same time, like, it does come off super shippy.
He also says, like, we also have a common enemy, and Napoleon is like, yes, vinegar.
Yeah, like the vinegar.
Yeah.
The vinegar is our common enemy.
I mean, I don't know. I think vinegar works pretty well with salt.
But
Clearly, Satine does not like salt and vinegar chips.
Napoleon just like he tried to show that this whole analogy is meaningless because obviously Satine was trying to poison him at the same time, and he was like,
"Yep,
you're saying that we work together, but we actually don't."
Yeah, the scene with him attempting to do the poisoning is actually really delightful because he is showing Napoleon his watch and he drops some kind of pill into their pitcher of water from his watch so that, like, Napoleon supposedly can't see it. Napoleon doesn't say anything about it, but then Ms. Taub comes and sits next to them and Napoleon leaves, but as he leaves, he grabs the pitcher of water because clearly he doesn't want Ms. Taub to drink the poison. And so it's like he knew from the beginning that this had happened, and so that's one of the things that keeps happening in this episode that's really just, like, really fun about it, is that they do keep one-upping each other like that.
Yeah.
They have a lot of really great dialogue, too, like, they steal a police car together, and as Napoleon is driving away, Satine says something, like, he taps on the edge of the car and smiles and says, "Don't use the car any longer than necessary. It's stolen." And, like, there's just, it's a very, like, snappy, sparkly episode.
Yeah.
So, for the fun of it, okay, I noticed that on the top of the police car, it says Polizia, and I was like, what language is that? And I was curious. So look it up, and it's Italian! They speak Italian in Cernia.
Yep.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that you can write Polizia as something like Serbian as well. Because...
Oh yeah, maybe
but wouldn't it be written in a different script?
No, they actually used Latin in Serbia.
Oh yeah, I know they use Latin there. Did they use Latin back then, or is it more a later introduction? Because did they use Latin alphabet back then?
That's an interesting question.
Okay, I thought maybe, like, they recently adopted the Latin alphabet and, like, historically used, like, Cyrillic because of, like, Soviet influence. But okay, if that's interesting, because, like, I just looked up, like, Polizia, and I just was like, Wiktionary, tell me what language this is, and it told me it was Italian. So
I mean, maybe it is just Italian, but it can fool some people into thinking it's maybe said.
Yeah, I think they just had like an Italian police like light thing that they could put on the police car. Good enough. And also
MGM
going into adding
backlot.
to like adding to like language confusion. One of like the officials is named like Mr. Lintz, and he totally has a French accent. I just was like, what? Why do you have it like this? Like he's an official of Cernia, and yet he has this super obvious French accent that's like really exaggerated. I'm just like, is the only foreign accent this actor able to do is French?
I mean, Montalban has his normal accent throughout the episode as well, so maybe Cernia is just a melting pot.
Yeah, like Cernia is very like culturally diverse.
There were actually people of multiple races at the big party scene.
Yeah.
So, hey, maybe Cernia is just like a cool place that's pretty progressive.
But it's also supposed to be a party at the American Embassy, and the shortest way to show America,
don't ruin my fun.
Yeah.
to use multiracial people, because America is a multiracial country. So, it's a funny thing. Whenever I look at the teenagers that were supposed to be like friends, I think of the reboot because they sort of like remind me Napoleon and Ilya from the reboot movie.
So this is proof that this actually took place in the 1950s, and then when they get older, they like are able to be Napoleon and Ilya in the reboot, because the reboot takes place in the 60s.
Oh my God. I just see it because they are very conventionally good looking and very tall.
I just am endlessly bothered by when teenagers are clearly adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do that to get around like regulations about like actors under 18, but
oh yeah,
still,
100%.
Still, like it's kind of like, oh my God, it's kind of cringy.
I also feel like as a teacher, I feel like I worry about that, how that, not in obviously a show from 1965, I don't worry about how that affects my 11-year-olds, but I do worry, for like modern television, like when kids see like Riverside or like Riverdale, that's what it's called. Like, when they see adults playing 16-year-olds, they think, yes, I'm going to be like that when I'm a teenager, and I feel like that's gotta be really bad for body image.
I've experienced with this.
Yeah.
Like, when I was a kid, I thought I was going to look so mature as a teenager. I thought I was going to be all tall, have this inverted triangle-shaped body, and be super manly and muscular. No, I have a baby face, and I'm all pudgy.
I'm 31, and I still have a baby face.
Same, yeah. Baby face is all right. When I was 13, I thought that high school would be such a dramatic time, and really nothing happened in high school.
Yeah. Yep. Man, I just thought everyone was gonna be so old looking in high school, and no, everyone looks like a baby, including me, because I'm actually in my last year of high school. I know I'm pretty young, but I'm just letting you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't really think that that's so much of an issue in terms of, like, current children watching Man from U.N.C.L.E. and being like, oh, wow, those teenagers look real old. But it's just, the general issue of, like, what are we saying about teens by having them always played by, like, attractive people in their mid-20s?
I mean, in the Man from U.N.C.L.E., they also don't really behave like adults. So they behave like very stupid children, and I think it's a normal role model for kids.
I found it really weird how much there's a major mismatch in this episode between the way the kids look and the way they behave, because they're behaving more like they're 13 and they look like they're 25.
Like, literally, like, I was gonna say, like, I said a thing earlier about teenagers being weird, but I'm, like, thinking, like, it's putting, like, a walkie-talkie in the bathroom listening to people pee sounds like something a 13-year-old would do.
Yeah, all of their behavior, like, the whole time I was watching the episode, I was like, oh, Jesus, this is exactly like the field trips we take with the middle schoolers. But the kids in this episode are supposed to be clearly, like, at least 16, probably, like, 17 or 18. And it's like, that's not how 17 and 18-year-olds behave. That's how tweens behave.
Yeah. Oh, there's also this shadowy figure that is supposed to represent Thrush, and I guess we can we can speculate that it was the head of Thrush actually, but we never get this confirmation because he's never brought up by anyone but the politician he works with, and like in the earlier episodes of the one from Uncle, they were still thinking about making Thrush somebody specific, because in episode 1 Napoleon said that it could be a man or a woman or an organization, and nobody knew who it was actually. But at the moment we of course know that Thrush is basically everybody, and
every bad guy in the world is Thrush.
Yeah. And it's interesting.
Thrush are Nazis.
Because they don't show his face, and he's standing in the shadows, and he has a very menacing presence, and we never really learn who it is. So it's interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's actually another comment that my husband made. So he hasn't seen the whole series. He's seen bits and pieces of episodes, and he was like, wow, Thrush was way scarier in these early episodes. And I was like, oh yeah, 100%. He was like, it's totally a puppet master situation where they're, like, secretly manipulating governments behind the scenes. Whereas, like, in later episodes, Thrush is like, hello, I'm here from Thrush with a gun to kill you. This is my Thrush-branded bowling bag.
Or they even sometimes say it like, Thrush. Thrush.
Yeah. Yep.
This
you
is
know
my
that
Thrush.
It's spooky.
This is my Thrush branded bowling bag.
You know something is spooky when you roll your R's.
Yeah, and so do you have anything else to say about this episode?
There's that one scene where, like, Napoleon and Satine aggressively embrace each other and kind of fight.
And they pretend to be brothers. Who are just
they pretend that they say they're brothers. I'm just watching it. I'm just like, brothers.
That's not how brothers hug. Also, Napoleon, he, like, whispers to Satine, like, because Napoleon basically, like, throws himself on Satine and is like, oh, my dearest brother! And says this in order to distract some of the, like, train guards. And, Satine is like, what are you doing? And Napoleon says something along the lines of, like, well, they're not going to, investigate either of us after, quote, this tender scene. And I'm like, Napoleon, you definitely don't have a brother.
Oh, yes, it was a good scene.
I definitely think Napoleon has sisters. I don't think he has a brother.
Yeah, no. I thought one thing that was really interesting in terms of, like, spy technology in this episode that I don't really remember seeing in any later episodes is, Napoleon actually has to hook his communicator into a telephone line at one point. So he's like hiding in a tunnel and he pulls out like a wire from his communicator and hooks it up to some of the wires under the bridge. And then he actually asks to open red channel instead of like open channel D.
Yeah.
And so the implication is that like their satellite relay doesn't work the way that it does in later episodes at the point that they're doing it in this season. But we don't really see him doing that again.
And also,
the in-universe explanation is that Uncle technology has progressed to the point where they don't need that anymore. But the real explanation probably is that it's easier to just make to just disregard that and just make plots that don't have to acknowledge that.
I mean,
100%.
he also did the same thing in the Neptune affair. Like, he had to connect
Hey guys, I noticed that.
his communicator to the radio station on the boat in order to contact Ilium. I mean...
Yeah, he does it, like, through the lamp, doesn't he?
Yeah! So maybe he just needs energy, or I don't even know how it works, but anyway, it didn't work as well as it did later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Later, this uncle has its secret uncle satellites all over the planets, and then you can just use your communicator from anywhere. And it has like such amazing connection; they can like penetrate Mother Earth anywhere.
Deep within Mother Earth.
Yep. If you're deep in a cave, it'll penetrate the cave.
Boy, I wish I had an uncle communicator.
I know.
Yeah, same.
Join the Uncle Satellite Network.
Yeah, and that's why they could afford like really fancy hotel rooms in season 1 and later they didn't.
Because they're selling cell phone plans?
No, I mean, because they had to spend all the money on satellites and Uncle just ran out of budget.
Yeah,
Secret Uncle satellites.
I thought that they lost all their money on Napoleon's suits.
That too.
Yeah, that too. I've noticed that in season 1, like Napoleon doesn't wear he wears more practical clothing. Like he doesn't wear a suit in absolutely all situations.
Yeah, he's dressed a little more appropriately.
That's because it's not in color, I guess. Because in color, it really would be very noticeable if he wore the same blue vest all the time. I mean, blue jacket. That he wore in the Neptune affair and in some other episodes as well.
Oh, yep, the blue jackets.
Yes.
Like that's the article of Napoleon clothing I'll just recognize now because of the fact it's on the cover of that one book.
So the blue jacket that Napoleon has on the cover of that one book that he also wears in a handful of season 1 episodes is like really, really similar to a blue jacket that Starsky wears in like a ton of Starsky and Hutch episodes. Except that Starsky would never be caught dead in a suit. But I think it's very interesting that there's that weird carryover that is definitely not carried into season 2, where they're like, wait, no, Napoleon's supposed to be suave. Why is he wearing a windbreaker everywhere?
Yeah, so I think maybe for I totally forgot the name of that book, unfortunately.
Was it The Rainbow Affair?
The Rainbow Affair, yes. I really think they probably used, an earlier photo for Napoleon, for that book, even though, I'm pretty sure that book was released, later into the Uncle, production cycle, because I'm pretty sure they didn't start making the tie-in novels until the show was, a more major success than the first season.
Well,
yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe, but also I think he actually wore the jacket later as well, because... Let me check. I have my database.
You have your Uncle resources?
Yes, I will send you the picture now. So, what else did I want to say? So,
yeah, there it is. There's the blue windbreaker.
Yeah,
the
it's
blue windbreaker.
from season 3.
Oh,
So, I mean, he keeps it in his closet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably like the in-universe explanation is that it's deep in his closet, and he kind of like started not being as much of his style anymore, so he stopped wearing it as much.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
By the way, if you want to get technical, there's actually the in-universe explanation is also known as the Watsonian explanation, and then like the real-life explanation is the Doylist explanation. So just some media comprehension vocabulary for you.
Yeah,
so
I actually have another Watsonian explanation for this. I think that he just stopped hanging out on the boats all the time.
I think he very specifically stopped wearing it because he thought maybe people would stop putting him on boats if he stopped looking like he should be on a boat.
Yeah.
Like, God, how can I make people stop bringing me near the water?
Okay, so in this picture, I know that the bar, like it's the top of the boat's like windshield, but like it looks like Napoleon's hair is like being cut straight across, and I don't like it.
Yeah, speaking of the Dove affair, it has a very like film noir look to it. So Napoleon even has like a real coat that makes him look a bit like some knockoff Humphrey Bogart or something like that.
Oh yeah, like Satine is totally having like the hard-boiled detective look. He even has like he has a trench coat. He has the fedora. He totally has that look.
And Napoleon as well. I mean, he's trying.
It's I mean, the characters from Casablanca, like, it's like if Napoleon is Rick, then why am I losing his name?
Oh yes, I think he's
Laszlo? Louis? Louis?
I think Laszlo was the husband of Ingrid Bergman, right?
Yes, Laszlo's the guy who is dating Ilsa.
Yeah.
Louis Renault, Captain Renault, that's his name.
Oh.
So you know, if Napoleon is Rick, then Satine is Renault, and you know, I mean, hey, this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, absolutely.
A total aside, I'm probably kind of doxing myself by saying this, but only to a very small subset of people. I used to run a club at my middle school that was, we would watch like classic films and talk about them, and it was pretty cool. And I showed one of my groups of students Casablanca, and they had a really hard time understanding it. Like, they were not dealing very well with the like old-fashioned language, and I like had to put on the subtitles and stuff. It was really entertaining. Yeah, but at the end, or near the end, one of the kids was like, so is Rick, like, is he dating Renault now? What? And she was like, well, you know, they walked off into the sunset together. And I was like, this movie was made in 39? No, 42. And I was like, so no, honey, that's not what's happening here. And she was like, can we say that's what's happening here? And I was like, yes, if you want to say that's what's happening. And she was like, I'm gonna make t-shirts that say Casablanca is a gay love story. And I was like, you do that, honey.
Oh, that's totally me though. Like I love old like war stories. It's kind of like something that I'm really into, and like there are so many times I'm just like, this seems kind of gay, but like because the genre is all about being like macho, manly. Even though I'm not saying being gay is not macho and manly, but stereotypically it's not considered that. So like oftentimes it doesn't really explore that as much as I wish. But I'm just like, oh man, like it's kind of gay.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to have a happy ending for Rick, then why not?
Yeah. I think that's part of it, is that they wanted Rick to have, you know, like, to be able to be happy at the end. And I mean, frankly, he and Renaud do seem like they've decided that, you know, they're gonna go have a good time freedom fighting.
Yeah. Drinking a lot.
But yeah. And drinking a lot, yes. But yeah, we watched a lot of movies that year that the particular group of kids I had that year were like, is this one gay? And I was like, no, it's not. I'm not allowed to show you gay movies. Oh no! But, you know. So, anyway, if you happen to be one of my students from that year who's listening to this and now you're like, oh god, we know so much more about our teacher than we ever wanted to know, please stop listening. There's a reason I don't use my real name on the internet.
So I guess we can like tell that the dove pendant was actually a thing that had all the thrush names written in it. Or have we mentioned it already?
Oh yeah, we never actually mentioned that.
We never mentioned why they actually wanted like the
that makes this
pin.
episode sound way more bonkers than it actually is to just be like, yeah, they're fighting over a pin the whole time. Don't ask why.
Yeah. That's season 3.
And also, just at the ending, like, Satine actually gets the pin and Napoleon only gets a photo of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because Waverly seems like totally fine with that. Yeah. Like, oh good, you still have the information, but I don't really understand how a Polaroid could possibly give you the same amount of information as the microfilm encoded in the diamonds.
And also, like, Waverly is says to Napoleon, don't talk anything bad about it, he might be listening to us right now. And it sounds very weird.
Yeah, the end of the episode, they're like Napoleon and Waverly are looking at the photo so the photo that was taken by one of the students, and it was taken because Ms. Taub. We also didn't mention the fact that Satine is afraid of children.
Yes. What about it?
So Ms. Taub, in order to give Napoleon a moment to slip away, sicks the children on Satine and lies and tells them that he's like the poet laureate of a country that has like fallen and now he's, you know, in exile and all of this stuff. And she's like, so he just needs a little kindness, children. And they're like, oh, we'll go talk to him. We'll let him feel, you know, welcome and loved. And so, of course, Satine is afraid of children. So, like, 14 kids descend upon his table in the dining car, and he's, like, looking like he's gonna crawl out the window. And they start being like, tell us about your poetry. Actually, let me be clear. The exact thing that happens is that one of the children says to him just, tell us about it. And it's so ominous. Like, he's looking at them like, tell you about what? And so anyway, in the process of talking to him about his poetry, which he does not understand what's going on because he's not a poet, one of the kids tries to take a picture with him because he's supposedly a celebrity, and they end up taking a picture of the dove pendant accidentally. And so Napoleon then steals this photo from the kids later and brings it back with him to Uncle headquarters. And he and Waverly are looking at it at the end of the episode, and Waverly just makes this totally weird crack about, like, somehow Satine is listening in on them. And Napoleon makes a face like, okay. Like, he is not tickled by this joke at all, and Waverly is just like, ha 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 ha, what if Uncle Headquarters was bugged? It's really strange.
Yeah, I also remembered something about that somebody who actually studied queer coding at university, said that Satine is very obviously queer coded because
Oh yeah.
he
Mhm.
is afraid of children. It's number one, and number two is that he has like weak stomach, and usually
Yeah.
people who were supposed to be manly didn't have any weaknesses in media. So it's
Yeah, 'cause
it's a
yeah,
thing.
because actually I was just going to bring up like if you guys thought he was actually intended to be queer coded.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he probably was supposed to be queer coded. I mean, maybe not even super intentionally, but subtextually he is pretty evidently coded.
Yeah, because queer coding doesn't have to be like a conscious thing. Like,
Yeah.
it can be a subconscious thing as
Yes,
well.
yes, it absolutely can be. And that's why it's interesting that Napoleon and Satine find such connections with each other.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of his lines have that kind of like, there's a certain kind of like sneering tone that is, I think, associated with a lot of like queer-coded villains.
Yeah.
And he does that occasionally at Napoleon, but then the two of them like smile over it, and it's really interesting because usually like that kind of character is intended to be, particularly in older media, like the queer coding is intended to make them seem repulsive. And
Yes.
that doesn't seem to be the case with Satine. Like, he's
Absolutely
very
not.
likable.
He's very likable, and he also wins in the end. So
yes, yeah. When they go their separate ways, he gives Napoleon a little wink. It's very cute.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like he knows what they did in the bathroom.
Yes.
Well, and also just, there's a bunch of moments where either the kids or Ms. Taub or like the train attendant people refer to, so Napoleon is pretending to be a travel agent named Mr. Brickman,
Yeah.
and repeatedly Satine is referred to as Mr. Brickman's companion.
Yeah.
Which is very much a like 1960s kind of like, bachelor kind of word that's used.
Confirmed bachelor.
Yeah, confirmed bachelor. That's his companion.
Yeah, so speaking of villains in this episode, Satine gets the dove. Thomas survives and she doesn't get any repercussions. But also in the Neptune affair, actually everybody dies. I mean, all the villains die. And it was a funny scene, kind of a funny scene, because in the end of the episode, Napoleon gave his fiancée and her father, they all sitting in the boat, and they trying to get to the shore, and explosion happens, and they get all thrown on the beach. And there's also a couple sitting nearby, and they're watching the fireworks, and the guy from this couple is like very unimpressed with the whole show. He's like, they would never show us anything. It was actually interesting because these fireworks were supposed to hide the rocket being launched, and of course the launch never happened. And he's like, I was promised a moonshine, something like that.
Yeah, they use a really strange term, and I'm not remembering what it was.
Yes, something with the moon. I guess. I mean, it happened before Americans landed on the moon, of course. So maybe it was like, let's have pretend moon shuttles. I don't even know. It was funny.
I feel like it might have been like, I was promised moonshot.
Moonshot, yeah, moonshot, yeah.
Moonshot.
But I don't actually know what that means.
Yeah, same. And what was also funny for me in this scene, because they land on a very rocky shore, and they are also met by a policeman who's like, "What are you doing here?" And the point is like, you will never believe what happened actually. But when I was watching it, I thought that it was the same rocky shore that they used in the beginning of the episode when they were showing Ilya actually in the Soviet Union seeing this poison leaking from a rocket. And it was really funny, but I checked and these are two different rocky shores. So I just don't know.
So they at least tried.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't know why they couldn't use a normal beach in one of these scenes, because if they used a normal beach without any rocks, it would be easier. It would be easier to distinguish them from each other, I guess. It's strange.
That is kind of weird.
Yeah.
I wrote with Napoleon's his interaction with the cop that my note was Napoleon says F the police. Because literally, like, the cop asks, like, what are you doing? Like, he's very agitated and concerned, and Napoleon's just like, it's fine, don't worry about it. You're not gonna understand even if we talk to you about it, and just walks past the guy and leaves. It's like, alright, Napoleon, that seems like a good way to get arrested, but okay.
Yeah, you can't even just bring out, like, my name is Napoleon Solo. I work for an organization known as the U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah, he's just like, no, sorry, buddy, not gonna explain it. Okay, me and my wet friends are gonna come up the beach now. Bye. Yeah, it's despite the lack of Napoleon Ilya content, it's a pretty good set of 3 episodes.
Yes, it is, but at the same time, I'm really starting to miss Ilya.
Oh yeah, Ilya is. I love Ilya so much. Like I fully understand why everyone freaked out about Ilya back in the 60s. Like Ilya is. Oh, I have problems.
Who doesn't have Ilya problems?
Yeah, I have Ilya problems.
Napoleon should have had a lot of Ilya problems.
I feel like if I don't know, I'm in the minority here as I think more of a Napoleon person.
I mean, me as well, and also I think that actually I noticed something, and it might sound very controversial, but people who are more invested in Napoleon than Ilya stay in fandom longer. So it's a funny thing.
Yeah, because I haven't been in the fandom for very long, so maybe I'll end up gravitating to Napoleon more eventually.
Yeah, maybe you will, because it actually happened to me, because at first, especially as a Russian person, I was super impressed with Ilya. And I actually had seen another show with David McCallum prior to that. And so I came to the show expecting to see Ilya, and I ended up really loving him. But in the end, I started gravitating more towards Napoleon, and that's where I am at the moment for the last, 5 years.
See, I came in already being more of a Napoleon person, but I always gravitate towards, the weirder one. That's, always my thing. Is but in any show, if there's a person
weird.
who's
they're both
I guess,
weird.
but,
They're both weird in different ways.
Yeah, Napoleon's more sort of...
I mean, Napoleon...
The word that just came into my head was wriggly.
Yeah,
he's wriggly and crinkly and squiggly.
Yeah, I guess whoever is the wigglier one is always the one I like better.
I love that word, wiggly.
I think it is because I am myself wiggly. I like seeing other people who also can't like sit still or move their body normally.
Yeah, like Napoleon's like crinkly face is like I always describe him as crinkly because I think that's a perfect way to describe it because he crinkles his face up in really weird ways and I love it.
I can relate to Napoleon because I too only seek in life mild amusement.
People, particularly at work, all the time are like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "You're making a really weird face." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And like, I just, when I'm thinking or when I'm talking, like, my face makes shapes that I don't expect and that I don't intend. And so, no, I totally get having a weird crinkly face.
That happens to me as well, and also people always think that I hate them. But I know what I don't.
I've been told that I tend to look like weirdly like nervous about things when I'm not. I don't really have like an angry face, but I have like a weirdly surprised face. Like you know that face Napoleon makes where he raises his eyebrows and like purses his lips a little. I think that's pretty close to my resting face. Like I'm just always mildly surprised.
I look more like Ilya with his resting bitch face, but I also make a lot of other faces, so it's funny. I mean, the reason why I can't really get over this show is because they both represent some styles of my personality, and it's like just seeing myself interact with myself.
Yeah, I kind of see that myself too. I relate to Napoleon, like, and like even though I love Ilya, like I definitely do relate and love Napoleon, relate to and love Napoleon as well, and see aspects of my personality in him as well. So I understand that.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any of Ilya in me.
Oh, wow.
I feel like I am not. I'm not very Ilya-like. I've never been, like, collected in my life.
I mean, they both are pretty different people, but at the same time, they have a lot in common with each other. So, I guess it would be a nice segue to us talking about what we'll be watching the next week, because the next week we'll actually watch an episode in which Ilya returns and he has a normal-sized part in this episode. It's called As the King of Names Affair, and it's not one of the best episodes, but it's fun to watch. And maybe I will also find some funny Man from Uncle trivia to tell you, because maybe it won't be as long of an episode as it is. I mean, as it is supposed to be.
This one is like comically long.
And this
so
one
I think that's okay.
This one is super long, yeah. So
yeah.
The next week will
Long boy.
Oh my god!
Are you guys familiar with coconut long boys?
No.
I'm gonna send you a picture of a coconut long boy.
Okay. So the next week
Which really sounds like I'm sending you something inappropriate now that I've said that out loud.
It sounds really inappropriate.
I have only ever seen these in what airport was I in? I think they're a regional they're a regional candy in the United States. Here, coconut long boys. They're like caramel, but they're long and they have coconut in them. And anyway, I bought one because it's called a coconut long boy.
that sure is one long boy.
He has very long legs.
I know. Imagine if you tried, like, drawing him, like, standing up. Like, his legs just would be so long. Someone needs to do fan art of him.
No.
We need to start the Coconut Long Boy fandom.
I feel like I unintentionally did that in my school because I started referring to many things as coconut long boys, and the kids were like, So yeah, this is the coconut long boy episode.
This is gonna be featured in the video.
I'm glad to hear it. I've contributed something.
Alright, so the next...
Not as good as that time that I drew Zombie Hitler, but I've contributed something.
Oh yeah, and you also drew our main, artwork for this podcast. So
Oh yeah! I did do that.
yeah, it's a lot.
But it's way funnier when I contribute things that are of no value.
Yeah.
No, it's a lot of value. Like, when I saw that Zombie Hitler, I just felt this sort of feeling in me that I've never felt before, that this was a true work of art that belongs, like, in every art museum in the whole world. It just meant so much to me.
I guess you could do that. It was a good art. It was a good art.
Thank you. I'm taking a little bow. You just can't see it.
So anyway, as I've been trying to say for the last half an hour, the next 3 minutes we're talking about...
Oh my god. That was a mega cough.
I think she died.
I'm trying not to cough more. I'll make it. Can you explain what you're trying to explain, and I'll
Oh my god.
practice my circular breathing.
So the next week we will be watching a prequel to the Term of Affair. That's all I can say now.
I don't even know what I'm laughing at anymore.
I mean, you will understand once we get there. Alright, I guess now we can say goodbye. Or can we?
Have a good night out there, all you coconut
Yep.
long boys.
Thank you for listening.
We'll see you
Coconut
all next
long
week.
I don't even know if we will be saner or more insane next week, so you will have to check and see for yourselves.
Bye.
Bye.